requesting everybody to please come in now. Let's begin with the presentations by the authors. Okay, so if you look at the program, the listing in terms of the presentations are in order, or in the chapter order that you'll find in the book. The first chapter was done by Fulori Manoa, Chopetarai, Romitesh Kant, and Smita Singh, and the title for the chapter was Designing for Mobile Learning. Unfortunately, Fulori and the team is not present today, but they send their warm wishes and best to the contributing authors and to the event as well. So moving on to the next chapter, which is by Mr. Eroni Radule, who is from the Center for Flexible Learning, and Ralph Buendromo, who used to be with the Center for Flexible Learning and now is with the Fiji National University. And the title for their chapter is Evaluating Students' Perception of Blended Learning. And we'll have a video presentation since Eroni is away on duty travel.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Eroni Radule. I, along with Ralph Buendromo, the authors for the chapter titled Evaluating Students' Perceptions of Blended Learning. Before I continue, I'd like to congratulate all the authors who are here today for the immense contribution, and I hope that you'll enjoy the day and everything else that happens after this. Just by way of introduction, the research focused on blended learning, and in particular, students' perception of blended learning at USP. And the primary objective of this project was to evaluate students' perceptions about their lived experiences while studying a course offered in the blended mode. And the secondary objective of this project was to use these findings to map out a strategy to enhance current learning design practices at CFL, particularly strategies related to developing a blended course. The blended learning landscape at USP could be divided or could be categorized into three categories. The first one being blended courses developed by faculty with CFL's assistance or input. And the second one is where the faculty develops blended courses on its own without CFL input. This usually arises due to some unforeseen circumstances. And the third category is where we have other courses offered in other flexible modes, print, online, but it has some form of blend happening within the course. The data for this research was gathered using an online questionnaire which was sent out to students, and we also conducted in-depth interviews at 4 campuses outside of Laucala, namely the Lambasa campus, the Lautoka campus, the Honiara campus in the Solomon Islands, and also the Kiribati campus. What inspired me to do this research? Well, my own experience as a distance learner was a motivating factor for me, because I was always wondering, how do these distance learners survive? I myself was a distance learner, and we wrote a whole book on this. We published a book called Flexible Learning Footprints. If you don't have that book, please contact CFL. We can give you a copy of that. It describes our experiences out there. We're out there in the remote areas, in the remote places, and we're trying to paddle our own canoes on our own. And the experience talks about the difficulties we face. So I was always intrigued by what other learners faced. And when I came and joined the Center for Flexible Learning, this is something that always interests me. How do distance learners integrate into a course, into a program. And this sort of prompted me or inspired me to conduct this research. How do our students view, how do they perceive courses offered in the blended mode? Now, to the outcomes of the research. Well, the survey questions that we sent out were framed using the dimensions of flexibility that's stipulated in USP's flexible learning policy of 2017. The response rate was not that great. We had a 6% response rate, and this was equivalent to 1,164 students. The findings for this research indicated that students' perceptions of blended learning differed for students at Laucala and those in our regional campuses. While the Laucala students find the learning experience to be a bit favorable, students in our regional campuses found it challenging. Our regional students felt that the students at Laucala were somehow more privileged than them, as they had unprecedented access to the resources, to the facilities, to the teaching staff, and other USP support structures here at the main campus in Laucala. Whereas the students in the regional campuses, they had to compete. They had to compete for these resources, and if they were able to obtain some of it, it was limited, and there were factors also beyond their control which hindered them from fully utilizing these resources. And as a result, their perception of blended learning is characterized by an experience that falls short of the optimal, and is often marked by discontent, by frustration, by anxiety, and sometimes hopelessness. Nevertheless, these regional students, they have devised strategies, they have devised ways to mitigate these experiences by developing good study skills and habits, and also by joining a community of peers within the campuses who support each other. The challenges. The main challenge for this project was the scope of the project itself. At one stage, we were looking at blended learning and also realized that we were ignoring blended teaching. But then, after a few discussions with our supervisor, we realized that the scope was too broad, and so we had to narrow it down to just blended learning. And we would look at blended teaching in maybe a second revision of the project. The other challenge that I faced was the logistics involved in arranging for the campus visits, because we've had to adhere to the timelines of our regional campuses. We've had to look at the things such as available flights, the timing of this semester, the timing that we're going to go into the semester. If there was any special events happening at the campuses at that time, public holidays in our regional campuses, all these had to be considered, and sometimes it was difficult. The communication between us and the campuses, sometimes it wasn't forthcoming. I'd like to also take this opportunity to thank our campus directors for actually accommodating us when we were on the ground, and thank you very much for that. The future plans. Before I go into the future plans, I'd just like to highlight some of the recommendations of this project. Firstly, one is to enhance the face-to-face orientation program for first-time learners. There is already an existing orientation program for all first-year students. However, we feel that this needs to be enhanced to cater for distance learners enrolling in the print, the blended, and the online courses. Secondly, the university, I feel, needs to develop and invest in a buddy system and nurture the existing community of peers on our regional campuses, where senior students provide mentoring assistance for newcomers to ease their transition to the new learning environment and the new learning style. Thirdly, invest more to the existing TeF spaces at some of our campuses, to include Wi-Fi access, to include some computers, to include study spaces for their students, so that it reduces the pressure on existing facilities at the main USP local center or campus. I believe some of this has been addressed already, but I believe that we can do better. Fourthly, the university could look into amending some regulations that governs some of our regional campuses, especially in consultation with I.T.S, in consultation with the library, in consultation with the student academic services, to ensure that students in these campuses have a greater flexibility in terms of their access to the USP facilities, because in some of these campuses they are not open 24 hours. If we could at least amend some regulations so that students can have at least 18-hour to 24-hour access to their campuses. And lastly, for the university to increase teacher presence at some of these regional campuses through increased local recruitment or more visits from teachers at Laucala. And this is especially so for 100-level courses offered through the flexible modes, especially the blended mode or the online mode, because this would greatly help to reduce the anxiety levels of first-year students. For the future, I believe this project can be further enhanced, further developed to include teachers' perception of blended teaching or teachers' perception of blended learning. And I'd like to also take this opportunity to thank the university for funding this project, for their support. I also take this opportunity to thank the Director, Center for Flexible Learning, and the Provost Chancellor for Flexible Learning for his guidance, for his leadership, for his support. And also I'd like to thank Ralph Bonromo for his assistance with this project. Thank you very much. God bless you all.
Thank you, Aroni and the team. Can we have a round of applause for Aroni and the team who presented and have contributed to the book chapter, Evaluating Students' Perceptions of Blended Learning. The next presentation is by Dr. Nicholas Halter, and his team has presented or contributed to the book with the chapter title as Engaging with Living Histories, and the team consists of Mr. Ralph Buondromo, Sanjit Chand, Nicholas Halter, and Ariti Tofanga. Over to you, Nicholas.
Thanks very much. Good morning, everyone. As I was introduced, my name's Nick. I'm one of the history lecturers in the School of Social Sciences. And our project that was generously funded by CFL was this Fijian History app, which you can download for free on your Google devices or access online from your PC by looking up fijianhistory.com. Why did we start this app? It first came about as a discussion between myself and Ralph Buondromo, who was one of the education technologists at the time. And I guess there were three issues or problems that we had been noticing or hearing about from our students. The first was literacy. We were getting a lot of feedback from our students that history requires too much reading, reading is hard, and not enjoyable. And it might reflect a general trend, perhaps in Fiji or even in the Pacific as a whole, of declining literacy rates. The second issue we found was that the history that students are learning in high school is generally not relevant to them. They associate it with very colonial subjects, ones that they don't feel personally connected to, ones that they feel that they are forced to learn by memorization rather than feeling any personal connection or relevance to. And the third issue that we were responding to here at USP was our transition from face-to-face courses to more flexible online courses. So some of the staff here at CFL were really instrumental in helping us, I think Irene up the back, converting our history courses to online mode from around 2016 or even 2015. And so we were one of the first departments in the university to offer a full major in history completely online. That presented a lot of new opportunities as well as some challenges for how we presented that subject matter online. So they were sort of the issues that we were responding to. How the discussion started, there were 4 members to our team, and each member sort of played a really important role in designing this project, and then ended up contributing to the app in different ways. Ralph was an education technologist at CFL, who had a long experience helping us with our history courses, as well as many other subjects. And he was really passionate about, I guess, translating what the students were saying and translating what we, the academics, were saying into a language that both parties would understand. And he was one of the ones that really thought up this idea at the beginning, and I must credit him with that. He's currently doing his master's in Australia, so really well done to him. The other person we had was Sanjeet Chand, who was a learning analytics designer, or learning analytics engineer at CFL, and is currently building on his success with the Fijian History app by running his own app and website design business. So Sanjeet was really the person, well, really the brains behind the operation, the one that translated what ideas we had as a team into how the app actually functioned. So there's a lot of back-end work, which required knowledge of coding and all sorts of fancy computer stuff that I don't understand. And Sanjeet was really the one that came up with the vision. So the idea was to create something that was functional, but fairly simplistic to use, didn't require too much thinking to understand how the app worked. So Sanjeet was really fantastic with that. The other person that is actually here in the room is Arisi Taufanga in the orange sweatshirt there, and she's a master's education student. So she was a history undergraduate. She did a history undergraduate with us for many years and has gone on to do her master's in education in the School of Education. So she was also a translator in a sense, translating what we were saying and towards the students, and also getting their feedback, conducting some interviews with them about what they thought about the whole project. So thanks, Arisi. And then there's myself, one of the history lecturers here. We're a small team, but we have some pretty big numbers in our classes, over 200 students in first year, 50 to 60 students in second and third year. And the numbers are really driven by a demand for history teachers in Fiji and the region. So we see a lot of our graduates going on to be high school history teachers. Often their first job is out in the distant islands, in the Lau group, or in the highlands of Viti Levu and Vanua Levu. And I've been here about 4 years now, so still consider myself a bit of a newbie. Just to briefly cover the app, I think if you go onto any website, you can type FijianHistory.com. I haven't checked if this works, but hopefully it does. Just to basically describe some elements of the app, one thing that we asked the students to do, so this was part of an assignment that they did in one of their third year history courses, was to first go out and do research. That meant visiting the National Archives, visiting the Fiji Museum, visiting some of the institutions in Suva, and talking to people on the street. Which sounds like a fairly simple task, but students actually found it was really challenging. Probably more challenging than the actual process of putting the things on the app. So coming up with these materials actually required a lot of on-the-ground work, running around, chasing people, getting permissions, repeated visits, to try and really draw out some of the hidden histories in the local Suva area. So chronology was one. If I just choose one, for example, the Suva Olympic Pool. So we asked students to just come up with a basic chronology of the history of that site, or in some cases we had villages or particular landmarks in Suva. Then we also asked them to find historic pictures, and you've probably all seen some popular reproduced pictures online, but the real treasure trove is in the Fiji Museum and the National Archives. And so getting permission to scan those photos and put them up was really important, and we're grateful to the Fiji Museum and the National Archives for their help. We also linked the app to Google Maps so that visitors in the region can use this app offline by basically logging into Google Maps, as you can sort of see a map here, so that they can walk around the town using their phone and take themselves on a guided tour. Lastly, I think the thing that people have been most impressed by or most noticeable has been the stories from the students. So in addition to coming up with all the information, chronology and references, the students actually made or recorded 2 or 3 minute little intros where they basically introduced the site. So to take one as an example, This was actually pretty fun to do. I'll take one as the Great Council of Chiefs, which we actually just recently updated this with the images of the burnt remains. But it was really wonderful to have these documents of these buildings before they might fall into disrepair, or in this case, actually be destroyed. So here's just a narration by our sake.
The Great Council of Chiefs building on Queen Elizabeth Drive in Nasese has origins as far back as 1872, when it was called the Native Council. During that time, Fiji was under the control of several chiefs until the deed of cession was signed on 10th of October 1874.
So that's just a little snippet. My impression is that people really appreciate hearing the students' voices, hearing all the different accents, whether they're from Kiribati or Fiji. It was actually really fun for the students from Samoa or Tonga or Kiribati to try and pronounce Fijian names and other things when they're recording the session. So that was a really fun part, and I think one of my favourite parts of the app. So what does the future hold? Well, you can read our chapter for a more lengthy explanation of some of the issues and what our plans are for the future. But just to highlight a couple. One, we hope that this would inspire some similar creative projects in Fiji and beyond. I think there's still a lot of potential here for Tourism Fiji and even the National Trust of Fiji. And at the moment we've set it up with Creative Commons so that people can use this information for educational purposes. I think it also could be something that could be translated Pacific-wide. What I've observed is that we have a lot of the Pacific diaspora now living in New Zealand, Australia and America who have access to wonderful archival sources that tell us a lot about the islands here. But the students here have access to the wonderful oral stories, but not necessarily the archival sources. So this project could be a really interesting way to link institutions and Pacific people in the Rim with Pacific students living here at USP and within the region. Some of this work has been going into my own research. We're looking at producing a book on Suva's history, something that hasn't been done since the 1970s, and we're hoping to launch that later this year. And timing it with the Pacific History Association Conference, which will be from the 1st till the 4th of December this year. So I'm hoping that when I can present on this app at the Pacific History Conference, I can inspire students and staff to think about ways in which we can bring history to life and make it appear more relevant to our students so that they can continue to pursue it, to study it, and to talk about it with their friends and family. I just wanted to thank Sharishna for all her help helping with this project and with the book editing, and to Som for leading this project and supporting it with funding. And thanks to our team, Ralph, Sanjit, and Arisi. Thank you.
Thank you to Dr. Holter. A round of applause again for Dr. Holter and the team for their chapter on engaging with living history.
Just make a quick comment. Pardon me for making this comment, but it's timely. Last year I gave a keynote at a conference in Brazil. And if you know the picture of Brazil, there's a town called Salvador on the eastern part of Brazil. And that was originally settled by the first migrants from the African continent. And they've got a similar sort of a situation there in Salvador. There's the story of the first African immigrant, or slaves they were at that time, mixing with the native Indians and then of course the Portuguese. And I was talking to this professor, it was a history professor like Nick, and I was telling him about this work, and he's excited. So now I put Nick and Alfredo Mata, my friend, together, and possibly something might come out of that collaboration. So this is how the diaspora, so to speak, grows, doesn't it?
Thank you, PVC Dainu. The next presentation is by Simeone Tuisawao, sorry. And not thinking about soccer there. And his team has worked on the title Collaborative Online Reading with Peruso. Over to you, Peter.
Good morning, everyone. Just before to start off, I'd just like to acknowledge the work of Dr. Daniel Watson from Fale and Maimoa Kambu. Both are not here at USP, and Varunesh as well from CFL. So exploration of online collaborative reading and annotation through the use of perusal. What inspired us to do this? One of the most common complaints I've often got from teachers, and we just heard it from Nick earlier on, is that our students don't read. When Dr. Watson first approached me, when we had our first meeting, that was one of the first things that she said: policemen don't like reading. And Amalis Tuta, when I was working in Port Vila, was almost in tears when he came into my room and said, neither the carrot or the stick approach worked. His students don't read, whatever he does. And this is not confined to us here in the Pacific. Even in the USA, 280,000 college and university students were surveyed, and only 30% of them do their readings, even when these readings were assessed. So with some of these things in mind, I attended in 2017 the ULON conference in New Zealand and heard Professor Eric Mazur talk about the flipped classroom. He was there to talk about the flipped classroom. He's big on peer teaching and social and contextual learning. And one of the little things that he was talking about that he used, one of the technologies that he uses with the flipped classroom was perusal, something which a technology that allows students to read collaboratively online. And when I heard what he said, with all the things that all the problems that we have with our reading here, I could straight away, in my mind I was thinking, student in Kiribati, student in Tonga could read one document and annotate. That should be a good thing. And the question that I was asking myself, why have we, through all these years, been sending our students to read independently or in an isolated context when most of what they do is done in a collaborative context, communally? A lot of them who come from the more rural areas of the Pacific do that. So we came back. Actually, Ralph was also involved in this project at the start before he took off. So we came back, talked with Varunesh, and and we also sent an email to the people at Harvard who run Perusal belongs to them, and it is free. It's available for free. So we were able to write and get approval to get it integrated with Moodle through Varunesh's help. And Dr. Watson was, her course, PP 101, Pacific Policing, was the course that we piloted this tool in. And there were about 53 students from all over, I think about 9 or 10 campuses in the Pacific. So we had our readings. She had 5 readings sitting there we moved the readings into Perusal, PDF documents. And they made up 10% of the marks that were available for this course. And then there were also short answer assignments, online quizzes, as well as a group presentation at the end. Perusal has AI, artificial intelligence, so the marking is done by the tool, So the teacher doesn't mark. They can go in and change the mark if they feel that that it needs changing. This is what it looks like. So the document the document is on your left, and the comments are on the right. So students highlight whatever they want to talk about as they interact with the text. They highlight, and as they highlight, a box opens up on the right, and then they make a comment, and other students can reply, as you've seen here, as you can see here. And right from the first week, we noticed one student, while discussing the text, the reading, actually found a YouTube that was related to the reading and put that YouTube video up. So right from the get-go, students were interacting, and it was just from our perspective, people who were trying to evaluate. We found that very exciting. Students, that we can see students interacting and reading, whereas before we didn't know whether they were reading at all. So to evaluate the use of the tool, we used Kirkpatrick's model. So we looked at reaction, how the students and staff reacted, see where there was any learning, change in behavior. We looked at results as well. So reaction from the students, overwhelmingly positive. They loved the interaction that they had with each other, the sharing of experiences. One of them said that they liked these are all from their comments. One of them liked the face-to-face classroom feel. That's what they said about that. One of them said they did deeper reading with the use of this tool. For the teachers, they love the quality comments. They love the sharing that the students did. And there was flow on. The discussions moved onto the face-to-face tutorials, the discussions that started online. And they were happy that the marking was done by the tool. Challenges, infrastructural issues, which have come up in the very first presentation. We had one policeman in the Solomon Islands who tried to use the internet, the system in the police station, and for some reason that wouldn't allow him to use perusal. But he was told to do his perusal assignments in the go to campus, and he was able to complete everything. And I think he got one of the highest marks. Another challenge that one or two students faced was that they were embarrassed at their level of English, which made them find it difficult to annotate, to read. They read, but they found it daunting to annotate and talk to the other students. From the teacher's perspective, and from us who were doing the testing perusal, we were not happy that not all students participated. Only 34 out of the 53, so about 64%. And 19 chose not to do the readings at all. So those were some of the challenges. Although that 64% is a bit higher than, is almost double the percentage of 30, which is what came out in the surveys in the US. 30% of students doing readings. These are the results of the 5 readings. So perusal reading 1, 12 people got full marks in the first assignment, and 17 people got 0 marks. So the blue line is the zeros. So as it went on to the next assignment, to the reading, the number of students who got full marks went up to 16. Students who got 0 went down to 8. And that trend continued until when we came to perusal reading 4, the students have picked up, had learned some of the skills, some of the knowledge, and the attitudes perhaps that they needed to do the task. So there were actually 0 students who got 0 when they reached the readings 4 and readings 5. Whereas the number of students who got full marks went up to 23. That transferred, the learning seemed to have transferred also to the other assessments. When we looked at how they performed, the 19 students who didn't take part in the perusal, who didn't do the perusal readings, seem to have performed, the ones who took part performed better than the ones who didn't. So 85% pass for those who did the perusal readings in the online quizzes, and only 15% pass for those who didn't do the perusal readings. Same thing for the short answer assignment. We found that 71% of the students who did the perusal readings passed that short answer assignment, whereas only 29% of the students who didn't do the control group, I shall call them, and with a final group presentation, 100% of the students who did the perusal reading passed that final assessment, whereas even though for the non-participants, the control group, 89% of them passed, still some of them, 11%, failed that particular assessment. So the results show that that things were transferred, the learning transferred from the actual to the different assessments. With regards to behavior, we also noted that students who did the perusal readings, the 34 of them, seem to have read more of the other readings that were not part of perusal. And only, like purple there is the number of, that purple bar represents the number of students that didn't do any reading, didn't do any of the compulsory reading. So for the perusal participants, there was only probably 1 student that didn't do the compulsory reading, whereas there was about 19. Sorry, there's about 9 of the other group, the control group, that didn't do any of the compulsory readings. Future plans, we are rolling out perusal to all the other courses, apart from the pilot course in Pacific Policing. A couple of courses in the other schools are now using perusal. We've just finished, I think 2 weeks ago, an online workshop for our teachers and support staff. We are doing further research to establish reasons for students' non-participation and how to address these. And findings from this study are being shared as I'm doing right now, as well as we are designing and developing a reading and annotation resource toolbox. And hopefully with all these plans, we can make the isolated student reading on his own, make the experience better, by having them read together and annotate together and have a more useful reading experience. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter and the team, on the chapter on collaborative online reading with Peruso. The next presentation is by Mr. Krishan Kumar and his team, and he'll be talking about his chapter on using peer assessment for formative assessments in large online courses, in classes. And the team included Krishan Kumar, Dr. Behaviour Sharma, Gavin Khan, Salsabil Hussain, and Sunainana.
All right, thank you. First of all, I'd like to thank CFL team for giving me this opportunity to carry out this project, Professor Som. And secondly, Associate Professor Behaviour Sharma for his guidance. Right, my project is about use of peer assessment in online formative assessments. So when you look at peer assessments, it takes you back to high school. You know, the time when your teacher said to, have you done your homework? And then he says, okay, please switch the book. You give it to your neighbor and you let your neighbor mark your work. So you must be thinking the teacher is lazy, but no. The teacher was trying out something new, and that's what we call peer assessment. So using it in tertiary level is through the use of technology, and we thought of using it with the use of Moodle workshop tool. And we tried this out back in 2015, and we wanted to make sure that this actually worked out well. So to make a decision like that, we need data. So we thought of the project, and thanks to CFL team, they called out for the proposal. We did our bidding, and we got in. Right, the research project, the motivation, as I've mentioned, we wanted to actually make sure that the idea worked out well, mostly for the generic courses. And if you look at the generic courses, the number is quite high. And if you look at the course which we have selected, which is EU100, it's more than 2,000 every semester. And the assessment is, one of the assessment is the weekly labs. And we have to make sure that the students get a timely response of their lab submissions. So we thought of a way to get automated assessment, and the solution was online peer assessment and through the Moodle workshop tool. So we wanted to explore this idea, and thanks to CFL again for the funding and the team for the guidance by Professor Som and Associate Professor Dr. Behaviour. And also thanking the UU100 course coordinator, Mr. Gavin, for allowing us to use this approach in the course. Without his help, we would have not done this, and he's part of the team as well. So the success and failures, we formulated our research questions, as you can see there. And currently we have published a conference paper that is research questions 6 and 7. We wanted to keep the assessment anonymous, where the peer grader does not know whose assessment they are marking, and plus the receiver does not know who graded their assessment. So in that way, it gives the room for the assessor to give a constructive feedback. So we wanted to make sure that worked out well. And likewise for research question 7, we are currently working on a paper for research question 1 to 5, where we have to make sure that the grades given by the graders are reliable. Okay, so that brings up a question that how many graders do we need? So it's a 2,000 more than 2,000 students. We don't want to pile up work on the students, so we wanted to do the stats and see what is the minimum to get a effective grade. So we are currently working on that. So that brings up with the first question, how reliable is online peer assessment? As you know that the course is offered in online and blended. The difference is that the blended, in blended mode they have a compulsory class, where online mode is offered in the regional campus, where students get to attend classes, but it's not compulsory. It's recommended that they attend class. They are given supplementary resource, e-mentoring as well. The second research question is, how valid is the grade? Okay, so we did some stats, and currently we are formulating a paper on that. So the stats are inter-rater scale, where we gave the students, one student was allowed to do 5, they were actually allowed to mark 5 assessments. So we thought that was a good number. So we wanted to make sure that whether it was valid and reliable. And then research question 3 comes into effect. What is the effect on student grades allocated by Moodle? So if you have worked with peer assessment, I believe some other courses are also using this. And this is the first research of its kind. And so if you have 5 raters, the average mark is given. So the average mark is given as for submission, and the assessment mark is also given. Since this course was offered in 2 modes, blended and online, we wanted to make sure that how do the study modes of online and blended students affect the grades, and also is there any significant difference in the Moodle grade of male and female students against the facilitator grade. So it was an experiment where the facilitators also marked the assessment. Okay, so the actual workshop was in progress, and the facilitators also manually marked the assessments, just to make sure that the markings are valid. So we did a comparative analysis on that. There was some hypothesis developed, and of course normal distribution and some stats. You can have a look at that. The success and failures. As I have mentioned, that this was the first study of its kind in the Pacific region, and as you know that there are studies of this kind conducted in overseas or other universities, mostly MOOCs. They use this peer assessment, and our contribution actually contributes the current literature from the Pacific context. As you know that USP is made up of 12 member countries, and the findings will add value to the current literature. Overall, the students had a positive experience, and let me just come back to the research methodology. They did their peer assessment, and we had a post-survey, and that is what you can see highlighted by point number 2 and 3. So the post-survey captured the positive experiences, and the feedback given by the marks, the peers mark, were useful. Students also had a positive attitude. We also captured the attitude. So they did say that it will be useful if it's used in other courses, right? So with reference to the results of this study and following the best practice in the book chapter, I recommend you go over that. We have recommended a framework where you can use that to implement a peer assessment. Okay? And as you know, it's an automated online formative assessment. So the advantage is we get a timely feedback to students, and the students get to enjoy the student-centered learning. And as an instructor, we make sure it works out well. Okay. Some challenges. So we figure out these 3 challenges. Complexity of the process. So we made sure that we have a video instruction for students before they engage into peer assessment. Right, so that was there. And another challenge is for us to actually engage into these new initiatives. There is no funding, but thanks to CFL, we did this quite well. And the last one is improving teaching practices. It's not a part of academic staff workload, but we wanted to make sure that students get the best experience of when they are doing the course. Future plans, you might like some few ideas we have put up. So in collaboration with CFL, we are willing to hook up some workshops if you're willing to use it in your courses. Project 2 in progress. We are finishing up the journal paper. We managed to get 1 publication done. Project 4, these are some new initiatives. I believe it's not used in the Pacific context. A study exploring the impact of chatbots. Right? We call it immersive learning in teaching and learning. And project 5 is, as you know, that we are using lecture capture, but we wanted to make sure that distance learners, right? Its impact on student achievement as distance learners. So there's a new project coming up, and the final project is we have captured the students' point of view. We wanted to know that academics' perceptions on the use of peer assessment as an automated. So those are the projects coming up this year. Thank you.
Thank you, Christian and his team, on the chapter on using peer assessment for formative assessments in large online classes. And also, thank you again to Christian for making his way this morning from Laucala to be here today with us. The next chapter is by Dr. Rajni Chan, and the title of her chapter is "It Rains a Lot Here: Online Assessments versus Mother Nature." Dr. Chan.
Hello, everyone. I don't have a PowerPoint presentation because you don't know how Mother Nature can play. The title of my chapter was called "It Rains a Lot Here," and there was a reason for calling it that, and I will take you through that in a while. But before that, I would like to thank Flora, who's joined us today, for actually initiating this idea when we started the online test as one of the assessments for the course that I coordinate. The course that I coordinate is UU 114, English for Academic Purposes, and as you know, it is a compulsory course in all programs, meaning that on average we have something like 2,800 to 5,000 one semester. We had that. And it is offered both semesters by all modes as well as flexi school. So we actually began including online after some hesitation, for the reason being that it is an academic skill course where we actually introduce the macro skills required for university studies. And being a traditional teacher, in a sense, I actually thought that it's a course where we actually need more hands-on approach when we actually introduce the skills to students meaning face-to-face as much as possible. However, over time, we realized that it had become challenging for us in many ways, being that we had issues with the staff workload, marking, SAS, and exam supervision challenges and all that. So we had initiated and started online mid-semester test, and we had introduced critical thinking, which had been part of the test itself, as an online component when Flora became the Moodle team support staff for me. And then when we had this project idea, Flora said, why don't we actually have a look at how the students are performing, and let's see whether they are actually engaging well with the online component that we have introduced. So we started looking at how the students were engaging, how many students were actually doing the online test, and what were the issues that we had to deal with. So we started looking at the data, thanks to Vasiti for actually including the data for us. And we found that where face-to-face students' involvement with online tests were concerned, it was easy. We could see them performing well, or they were also participating in the tests as expected. And every semester, I had to basically engage with this campus staff to find out which campuses would be actually willing to include online mode rather than a print-based test. And we had a list of the various campuses where we had the facilities as we had thought, and we took it for granted that the campuses as well as the students would engage with the online rather than a printed test. That wasn't so. We found campuses with good infrastructure as stated, a very high student number, saying no, we'd still opt for the printed test. So we had a look at the data, we had a look at the campuses, and when this project was approved, we had a look at the campuses where we had a very high student number, and then thought to find out why were students still opting for a printed rather than an online test. And it's not something that we had not given them prior practice of. The Moodle page had already samples of online tests, links to various websites where we had online activities. So they had an idea what online critical review thinking would be like. We were giving them sample material, we were giving them all the activities and things that would actually help them. And yet, they were refusing to participate in an online method rather than a printed test. So, thanks to the funding given, I decided to go to 2 of such campuses where the students were still doing printed tests rather than the use of the test via Moodle. At one of the campuses, when I visited, I went and saw the computer lab. There is a list of 2 such computer labs with something like 25 computers in each lab. We had a face-to-face group of about 80 or 90 students there, and we said that was enough for a 2-day or a 24-hour period during which the students could attempt the test. Out of those 50, only 15 computers were working. How can we expect students to attempt an online test when the computers are not functioning? So that was one campus. The second campus I went to, the sub-campus is where the students had opted for online mode of learning. So I went to that campus, and what my article basically is like a personal blog. I had gone to Savai via the ferry, landed there, went to the hotel. On the way to the sub-campus where I was supposed to interview the students on why they were not enrolled or why were they not performing well in the online. The hotel receptionist just said to me, "It rains a lot here." I didn't take that seriously, just borrowed the umbrella from her and went. When we reached the off-campus, the students trickled in. And the reason given was, whenever it rains, the network is down. So that was something that we had not even thought of would be happening. So what this report, or what I would say, this research has given me an idea on that in the region where we are, I always say about the time zones, the millions and millions of kilometers we cover, but we still have the diversity, we still have the student population where we have to think about what they actually have, how much are we taking for granted. And when I'm looking at something like academic skills, of course we have students from the linguistic, the proficiency diversity as well. And when we have something like critical thinking to basically be introduced in our Pacific culture, it again is a challenge. So we have the infrastructure, we have the geographical, we have the proficiency level, we have all of these that we still have to think about. And I'm all for infrastructures or things where we can introduce or provide as much as possible through online education methods. But there are times we have to think about the Mother Nature, and there would be where we still need to have plan B, C, and D. And that is why we have to respect the Mother Nature and think about those whenever we want to do anything where distance, open, or face-to-face learning is concerned. And that's what I have written and mentioned, that we need to have a lot of things in place. The challenges, of course, is firstly the infrastructure itself. However, we have other things that we need to also think about, things like the online security system, when we have to include the tests and things of that sort. Of course, we also have to think about what do we want to actually provide for the students. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Chand, on a chapter, again, which is entitled, It Rains a Lot Here, Online Assessments versus Mother Nature. The next presentation is by Dr. Irene E. Chief and her team of herself and Parijata, and the title of their chapter is Supporting Flexible Assessment of Competencies with E-Portfolios. Over to you, Irene.
I thank you very much. I'm glad that it's not raining today. After hearing what we have to deal with, we tried something different. We recognize the deficits that we have in our countries, but at the same time we wanted to navigate and move forward to give our people hope. So first I want to thank Parijata Moeva, who is right now in the West. She's not able to come, even though she really wanted to be here, because she wasn't feeling well. So I thank the team for trying to, Sharishna, for helping her to try to get here. Okay, the issues that the e-portfolio wanted to address was for Pacific TAFE. As you know, Pacific TAFE offers, like for example, courses that are much more pragmatic, that are practical and less theoretical. So the issues we identified was that they had workbooks which they had to fill in weekly and that to be signed by the supervisor in the industry. What our people had to do, or what our students had to do, or our learners had to do, was be based in a hotel, get their work done, get it signed, send it back into USP Laucala campus. These were the areas. As you can see, they're very practical. Food, beverage, front office, events, sales, marketing, right? A lot of face-to-face work. Now this program, the Certificate in Hospitality, is a final practicum where all the objectives and all the skills culminated to make the practicum. So if they fail the practicum, they failed the whole certificate. It looks simple theoretically here, but if you have to do 600 hours, and if a hotel only wants you to do food and beverage, you have to find somewhere else to go to finish front office. And that's why using technology will be able to allow them to capture those components and finish the 600 hours or 6 months. This is the framework, and these were the students that were based in the areas. I have good news. These are where our students are employed right now. The people who did the portfolio are employed right now, even though we can't put their names here. These are the areas. So USP, through Pacific TAFE, is offering opportunity for people to finish their course and to be employed. I think we should give them a clap. What did we try to achieve? We had the international standards, we had the graduate attributes, we had the program outcomes, and we had assessment rubrics. Part of my work as a designer was to align all of it so that every standard was matched. That was part of my entertainment. And I'm glad that we were able to use the grant to do all that. The challenges. We had people working at the background. We included Mochito Tione, who had to work with digital literacy. Our students came from all kinds of backgrounds. So the user breakdown is here, and the access to internet. 1 to 3 days, 38%, 4 to 7 days, 62%. They used a variety of devices. This is our flow chart. We did a full breakdown of how it worked. Theoretically, sounded really good on paper, just like Raj means. Our solution, okay, our solution was built on something that we had done previously. We had a grant previously from research office, and we were able to build a toolkit. We used the ePortfolio grant to create this toolkit so that the rest of the university is able to use or learn how to use different technological steps. So it's now available in Moodle, but it was actually created for this group of students. And this was the ePortfolio toolkit. You can find it on Moodle. You can open it, look for audio, and each student can go in and pick whatever they want to pick. This was the platform, and our solutions in detail. We looked at all the details on how the things, or how the pieces could come together. This was a sample ePortfolio. It should have all those components, and they were assessed online. In August 2016, we started scoping, and the culmination is also this research paper. The impact. Our thinking was to enable it to reach out to the region. Since hospitality is quite strong in the Pacific Islands, we attempted to create something which could be piloted, and this project gave us an opportunity. Pacific TAFE, we had Parijata, who was very enthusiastic, and she was able to work with the students, work with us across the different hotels. And she's in Nandi right now, still working with the hotels, trying to get students in. The students gained digital literacy skills, and they were also employed as previously. These are her comments. It provides a platform. It encourages more participation due to being flexible. It allows the students to have ability to learn teaching and learning technology. It's cost effective because students have to pay to send that whole document. And ePortfolios can be carried forward or transferred to their professional demonstration. Instead of just being a transcript, they're able to demonstrate to the industry or the people who are to employ them what they can do, how they can make coffee. These are examples where they have rubrics which show how they scored. So we thank also the people of the SRT project, Mochito, Raj, Neil, and the support of Dr. Hasmukh Lal, who looked through all the different steps before we worked. Conclusion, we thank SOM, our PVC, and the TeL's grant team, who enabled us to publish this project. We believe that e-portfolios are doable, and the chapter actually gives you a lot of what students say. I didn't give you that, but it's in the chapter where we thematically worked on how they perceived e-portfolios and how it benefited them. Support and training is necessary if we're going to have new infrastructure. I think one of the challenges that we face is if we're going to improve or build new technology into our teaching and learning, we need to really plan so that it can be scalable. And this is what I want to see for e-portfolios in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Irene and a team on their chapter on supporting flexible assessment of competencies with e-portfolios. The next presentation is by Evan and Nitendra from CFL, and their chapter looks at researching learning and teaching technologies for flexible learning.
Hello everyone. So today I'll be making this presentation with my colleague Mr. Evan Nangelevu. Our title for this research was Researching Learning and Teaching Technologies for Flexible Learning. The two technologies that we mainly focused on, number one was the lecture capture system, and secondly was the Big Blue Button. Most of you are aware what a lecture capture system is. As for BBB or Big Blue Button, it is an open source web conferencing tool that is readily available via our learning management system. Okay. Currently we are trialing out the latest version that's available on Moodle. And actually my colleague and I have decided to use the BBB technology to make today's presentation. Okay. Let's see and wish that the technology supports us today. Okay. So what my colleague will be doing is he'll be basically focusing on our reflections and the results that were generated while carrying out this project. So with these words, now I'm handing over to my colleague.
Thanks, TeL. Good morning, everyone. This is a bit of an echo, sorry about that. I have not isolated myself in fear of getting coronavirus, but as Nitin mentioned, we are just trying out the Big Blue Button. It doesn't seem to be successful with that echoing happening.
You are now muted.
But anyway, apart from myself and Nitin, there were two other team members on this group, and that was Vasiti and Flora Bentley, who have left us for Fiji National University. I won't go into too much detail, but in our chapter of the book, we reflected on our experience in a project that gathered information and feedback on student and faculty experience at USP in using a suite of tools that was lecture capture, React, Big Blue Button, Zoom, which generated video recordings of lectures for students to use or refer to in their course. And the title of our project was Effective Use and Integration of Technologies in Support of Flexible Learning at USP. For this purpose, in our reflection, we mainly reflected on two learning and teaching technologies, which were lecture capture and also Big Blue Button. We described briefly how and where we collected data, and importantly, getting to know the processes at USP in obtaining uh, ethics clearance before proceeding with collecting data through an online survey using SurveyMonkey and conducting interviews in Laucala, Alafua, and MLS campuses. So when we administered the online survey, which was distributed to, a link was sent out to all students and staff uh, through the email, through our email addresses, and our respondents came from all over the region, as you can see, apart from Niue and Cook Islands, where we didn't get any respondents at all. There were a whole range of questions we did pose in the survey, but we thought for this purpose, we'll just focus on some of the key questions that would decide what we wanted to tell. And we were interested in using the use of the lecture capture videos, since lecturers were saying that it was causing students to miss their classes. And as you can see, 81% of the staff thought that way. And on the other hand, those students admitted to missing classes. More than 50% in the survey did say that having recorded lecture videos was not really the main reason for missing those classes. So this begs to have a bit more investigation, and we did find out a bit more through our interviews with the students, and that they did find the videos a helpful resource, especially when they're sick or unable to get to their class due to unforeseen reasons such as transport or even natural disaster happening in the area. We also wanted to find out about Big Blue Button in our survey as well, and whether lecturers and students knew about it. But our main focus here was about the whether lecturers at USP were using it. And through the survey, we saw over 60% of lecturers or faculty who responded to the survey didn't know much about the Big Blue Button, which led us to organize and plan Big Blue Button workshop sessions in the future after we had conducted the survey. And so we saw that there was a need there. So in regards to the results and where we presented them, we did present them at the research office's Research Skills Development Symposium in Suva in 2018. And also when we visited the campuses, we did try to disseminate some of this information in Alafua and MLS. And at Laucala campus, we did have some poster presentations organized by CFL, and also through our TED Talks seminar series in Laucala. Through the project, as mentioned, we did conduct some Big Blue Button workshops. We embarked on facilitating and promoting the use of Big Blue Button, which is a web conferencing tool, as Nitin mentioned. We received positive feedback about this tool, but in most cases in using these technology, there were IT issues that we faced, especially in Vanuatu. And the main reason was caused by the fire, which discontinued our workshop while we were there. So that affected that workshop, as well as also our research where we lost a bit of equipment and some of our recorded interviews in the fire. So there were several lessons that were learned, as you might read in our chapter. Uh, and as we've reflected on our experiences, as you can see, it was an invaluable experience for us and a form of capacity development for the team, especially with our E.T.s, getting to know our campus staff and also working with the I.T.S team. And I think there's more need for collaborative effort that as CFL, we can't really work in isolation, and that our work does depend on working with faculty, students, as well as our other professional staff in the USP community. And I think what we want to leave here is that the use of recorded lecture and tutorial videos should not be seen as a threat, but really as a supplemental and alternative to lectures to provide students some flexibility for their learning. And so that's really what we really want to leave with this session. And hopefully there's more research that needs to be done to investigate this and really get in-depth feedback from the students and also faculty. Just on behalf of the team, we'd also like to thank Professor Som Naidu, Pro Vice Chancellor, Flexible Learning and Director CFL, for giving this opportunity to us to carry out this project. This was very invaluable, as I mentioned, and also would like to thank Professor Chito Vanolailai and also the USP Research Office team for facilitating some of the clearances and sort of educating us on what we needed to do in USP. And we'd like to thank those TeL's coordinators, Sharishna and Flora, the USP students and faculty, USP-wide, for answering our survey and participating in the interviews. And also, especially the Alafua campus director and Amalas campus manager, who also helped facilitate our visits, and also their staff as well, right? Especially to I.T.S, SLS, and the admin teams and CFL teams in the region. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Evan and his team on the chapter on researching, learning, and teaching technologies for flexible learning. And I think that was his timer to show or indicate to him that his time is up. The next presentation is by Tilisi Bryce and her team, and their chapter reads, Supporting the Transition to Tertiary Level, How Students Engage with Academic Literacy.
Thank you. Good morning. Yes, it is still morning. Good morning, everybody. I'm happy to be here to represent my colleagues. I see that they are all here and in conducting this project. And if you have any questions at the end, I would refer you to them. So we have Dr. Fiona, Ralph, of course, was a member of the team at the beginning, but as we've heard, he's gone on to further studies. Rajendra Prasad, who's a colleague in SLAM, and Alowesi, who did the hard work in working out the stats for us in this project. Our purpose in this project was mainly to try and find out if student learning could be enhanced, could be improved, if academic literacy materials were embedded in a content course. As you can see on the left-hand side, the diagram on the left-hand side basically represents most USP courses. A course is taught by a discipline or a subject specialist who mainly focuses on the content of the course. Literacy support is available but students have to go to other places. They have to go to other centers like the library, for example, for help in terms of their research, or they go to SLS for support in terms of developing their English proficiency, or students are enrolled in a generic academic course such as UU 114. So literacy support is available, but they are not part of the content course. Our project, on the other hand, we were interested to find out if we could embed the literacy materials within the content course and to see if this was viable for students' learning. We were interested to find out if students would learn better, perhaps acquire more content learning, if instead of going outside of the content course, the literacy support is part of the tasks and the activities of the course content itself. We were interested to find out, part of our interest in this particular project was to see if, beg your pardon. Part of our interest in this, initiating this project was to see if by this new course design would help ease the transition from high school to university, and if there is any way it could improve the retention rate. Furthermore, with USP's move to expanding education throughout the region by providing online courses, we wanted to find out how well our students are engaging or are grappling, are coping with this new way of learning, using online tools, using online platforms to acquire learning and to advance knowledge. So the course that was used for this project was a first-year linguistics course, LN 111 Introduction to Language Studies. It's a course that is offered in both blended and online modes. And at the time of the project, there were about 180 students, both in Laucala and in the region, who were enrolled. The course had 3 main learning outcomes, and the primary outcome, of course, was in acquiring the linguistics content. But there were 2 supplementary learning outcomes, both of which focused on acquiring of this literacy materials, and particularly in terms of developing students' skills development, as well as improving their communication. In relation to the tools that were used to conduct this research, basically there were 3. We used screencast-assisted interviews, and these interviews were conducted in Laucala, in Kirkpatrick, in Lambasa, and in MLS. So thank you very much, CFL, for the funding that enabled 1 or 2 of our team to travel to these campuses to conduct these interviews. There was also, by using Moodle, to track how well the students were engaging with the course materials, and at the end of the course, there was a questionnaire that was administered. Moodle was very useful because we used it to track the students engaging with the course materials. This engagement with particularly the supporting literacy materials, this engagement was evaluated in 4 aspects. And these aspects are in terms of access. So Moodle help us to see the extent to which students went onto the Moodle page, browsed, maybe scrolled up and down the page. They didn't have to do anything, but they access the material. And Moodle was able to tell us the extent of students doing that. And then secondly, second element of this engagement, it was compliance. And here, the interest was on the extent of students not only going in, accessing the materials, but also fulfilling the tasks, fulfilling the activities, and not just fulfilling the activities, but doing those activities on time. And further to that, they didn't just do it on time, but they also did the activities in the sequence that the lecturer had instructed. The third element was investment. And here, Moodle helped us to see the extent that students not only access the materials, they complied with the tasks and the activities, but they also went beyond that. They did more than the requirements of the tasks, because that showed us how much the student was interested in the course, or they could see a benefit in going beyond the basic requirements of a task or an activity. And then finally, of course, there was the achievement element, which was the totality of how well the students had scored or achieved a good result at the end of the course. So in terms of the results, some of the findings that the project helped us to learn, our main finding, and I'm sorry, I think the main finding somehow dropped off the slide. Our main finding was that, of course, students who access the materials, the support materials in the course, who utilize those materials, who complied with the activities and the tasks, and also invested time and effort in going beyond the basic tasks, did achieve the best. I guess there's no surprise there. But it taught us that it is possible. Students who are able to use these supporting literacy materials, they are able to use them for their benefit. They did better in the course content. They acquired better marks. And as the statistics had showed us, you can see this in the chapter, had showed us that the students did better when they complied, when they engaged with the supporting literacy materials. But at the same time, there were other findings that came out of the project. One of which, of course, maybe is not a surprise, that students in both blended and online modes tended to prioritize assessment tasks over non-assessment activities. The surprise for us here was that students somehow did not work out that the non-assessed activities were supposed to help them do better in the assessments. But somehow students just jump straight onto doing the assessments and not the activities and the tasks that would have helped them perform better. Another finding that came out of the research of the project was the approach that students took, the two modes that they took towards engaging with the same materials. Blended students, for example, tended to give more priority to attending tutorials than engaging with the online materials, doing the tasks and the activities. We think maybe this is a carryover of the mindset of attending face-to-face tutorials in a face-to-face mode. And the fact that the attendance was given credit, maybe that was a carrot for them to give priority to attending tutorials rather than engaging with the online material. The online students, on the other hand, tended to skip the tutorial activities provided online and focus more on, again, on the tasks and the activities that were assessed. And we think maybe there is this mindset of compartmentalizing what they had learned through coming through a face-to-face interactions, even at high school,